The first Europeans to set foot in the New World. Part 1. Europe before the discovery of America. Long before the name America ever appeared on a map, before ships crossed the Atlantic with flags of empire, Europe stood at a turning point in its history. The story of how Europeans first set foot in the New World does not begin on distant shores, but deep within the political, economic, religious, and intellectual struggles of medieval Europe. In the late Middle Ages, Europe was a continent constrained by limits. Its population was growing, its economies were expanding, and its ruling powers were hungry for wealth and influence. Yet the known world was finite. Trade routes to Asia were long, dangerous, and increasingly controlled by rival empires. Precious metals were scarce. Spices, silks, and luxury goods flowed into Europe at great cost, enriching intermediaries rather than European kingdoms themselves. This imbalance created pressure that would ultimately push Europeans toward the open ocean. By the 15th century, Europe was emerging from centuries of feudal fragmentation. Centralized monarchies were consolidating power, especially in Spain, Portugal, France, and England. These kingdoms required revenue to fund armies, maintain authority, and compete with rivals. Gold and silver were no longer luxuries, they were necessities of statecraft. At the same time, Europe was still reeling from the effects of the Black Death. Though the plague had devastated populations in the 14th century, it had also reshaped society. Labor became more valuable, wages rose, old social hierarchies weakened. A new merchant class gained influence, particularly in coastal cities engaged in trade. Trade, however, depended on access. For centuries, European access to Asian markets had relied on overland routes such as the Silk Road, which passed through the Middle East and Central Asia. These routes were costly and slow, and by the 15th century, they were increasingly dominated by powerful Islamic empires, including the Ottoman Empire. When Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453, European leaders viewed the event not only as a religious loss, but as an economic catastrophe. The old paths to Asia were closing. Europeans began searching for alternatives. If goods could not come to Europe by land, perhaps Europe could reach them by sea. Portugal took the lead. Situated on the western edge of Europe, Portugal faced the Atlantic Ocean rather than the Mediterranean. With limited agricultural land and few internal resources, the Portuguese monarchy turned outward. Under the patronage of Prince Henry the Navigator, Portugal invested heavily in maritime exploration. Though Henry himself never sailed far, he supported shipbuilders, navigators, cartographers, and scholars who studied winds, currents, and celestial navigation. Portuguese sailors gradually pushed south along the coast of Africa. Each voyage went a little farther than the last. They mapped unknown shores, established trading posts, and gained valuable experience navigating the open ocean. Along the way, they encountered African kingdoms, engaged in trade, and laid the foundations of the Atlantic slave trade, an institution that would later play a central role in the New World. Technological innovation made these voyages possible. European ship design improved dramatically during this period. The caravel, a small but highly maneuverable vessel, allowed sailors to tack against the wind and travel farther from shore than ever before. The magnetic compass, astrolabe, and improved maps gave navigators tools to measure direction and latitude with increasing accuracy. Knowledge from the Islamic world was crucial. European scholars adapted mathematical and astronomical texts preserved and expanded by Muslim scientists. Without this transfer of knowledge, transatlantic exploration would have been impossible. Religion also played a powerful role. Europe in the 15th century was deeply Christian, and conflict between Christianity and Islam shaped political priorities. The Reconquista, the centuries-long effort by Christian kingdoms to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule, ended in 1492 with the fall of Granada. Victorious Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella saw themselves as defenders of the faith. Exploration became an extension of religious mission. European rulers believed that spreading Christianity justified conquest. They also hoped to find Christian allies in distant lands, including the legendary kingdom of Prester John, thought to exist somewhere beyond the Islamic world. Exploration was framed not only as a quest for wealth, but as a divine calling. Meanwhile, ideas were changing. The Renaissance brought renewed interest in classical learning, geography, and human potential. Scholars questioned ancient authorities and sought knowledge through observation and experience. Maps were revised. The world seemed larger, more complex, and more accessible than previously imagined. Contrary to popular myth, educated Europeans did not believe the Earth was flat. By the 15th century, the Earth's roundness was widely accepted among scholars. The debate concerned size, not shape. Some believed Asia lay much closer to Europe when sailing west than it actually did. This miscalculation would have enormous consequences. As Portugal focused on sailing around Africa, another idea took shape: reaching Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic. The Atlantic, long feared as a vast and deadly sea, was slowly losing its mystery. European fishermen already traveled far into its waters. Islands such as the Azores and Canary Islands had been settled. The ocean was no longer a boundary. It was a pathway. Into this world stepped a man whose name would become inseparable from the story of the New World: Christopher Columbus. But Columbus did not emerge in isolation. He was a product of his time, shaped by European ambition, religious fervor, technological progress, and economic desperation. To understand his voyage, and those who came before and after him, one must first understand the Europe that created him. The discovery of the New World was not an accident. It was the result of centuries of pressure building within Europe, pushing explorers outward into the unknown. In the next part of this series, we will examine the earliest Europeans known to have reached the New World long before Columbus, the Vikings, and the archaeological evidence that confirms their presence in North America. Their story challenges traditional narratives and forces us to reconsider what discovery truly means.